much. It's too much to handle. It's too much to deal with.
Too much to handle. Nothing is ever too much to handle.
That could be the title of my autobiography. It'd be funny if it weren't so true.
What do we got on the docket today? This one's new to me.
Really? That surprises me.
Yeah.
It's not often referred to as memetic theory so much as it's now referred to in modern day as memetics, because there is another theory out there by the title MIM memetic theory.
Yeah.
That's a whole entirely different philosophical debate that has absolutely nothing to do with this. So I think because the two have crisscrossed wires in the searchable space, they refer to this that we're discussing here today specifically as memetics, which is the base theory where the idea of quote-unquote internet memes comes from. So there is a broader, deeper discussion of what memes are. Memes are just a symptom of this theory, really.
Yeah, okay.
And the brass tacks simplistic version of it is you make a thing, a piece of creativity, a book, a movie, or whatever, any kind of piece of creativity. You put it out into the world. The idea is that that thing is now a part of society and you don't own it anymore. It's like you're not the controlling entity of that thing once it has been released into society.
Okay. So once
it grows on to have a life of its own beyond your creating hands is the idea.
So essentially your company's going public once you put it out there is what we're going here with.
Yeah. And like say that the board of directors is no longer in charge. And like now it's the populace of the planet is the board. And that's the idea behind it. And that's why I feel like I have to laugh every time you're online looking up memes, as, you know, people in our 30s do. And somebody gets real irate in the comments saying, oh, you stole my meme.
Yeah.
And this whole entire set of theory sets off in my brain. And I'm like, by definition, that statement makes no sense, because the point of what a quote unquote meme is that it's memetic and it has transcended your ownership.
Yeah.
So I have to laugh whenever I hear that.
So what is exactly, I'm going to be real here. What is a meme exactly? What is the boilerplate definition of a meme?
It's kind of loose, but it's like anything you can transmit. Like there's obviously various definitions of this. Like people would say that Star Wars is technically a meme because George Lucas let it out into the world and it's no longer his. So
yeah.
You know, you could argue there's a lot of ways.
Okay, well, let's go with the most popular.
As the internet would define it, it's a joke in either a picture or video form that is quickly and easily transferred and goes throughout the internet.
Disseminated. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very rough, but like putting
something
inherently that can't be put into a box.
To sort of, to go off of.
Yeah, to get the crowd in there. Get them up to speed. But yeah, meme culture has grown up in mine and your lifetime, so it's been something like interesting to watch grow that didn't exist before the internet. So it's kind of weird that this theory dates back to the 20s and is now like really getting a visible understandable life through how like these jokes and like quote unquote memes are sent back and forth through the internet.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, certainly it didn't exist in the way that it does today. No, I mean the
like everything else, it evolves into some other monstrosity that the internet wrangles into some hellish creations. The internet's a terrible place. Don't go there.
So where'd you come across this? I had never heard of this theory though.
So honest to God, once I started hearing the word meme thrown around, I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I've never heard this word before. And I started looking it up, and then I got onto like the deep theory of like what memetics is and like what the memetic theory is. And I was like, oh, so this is symptomatic of like a deeper philosophical discussion, but it's like it's being basically boiled down to send jokes through the internet. And I think that's utterly hilarious.
It's so funny. Like, I remember someone saying, like, "Oh, what are those memes that are out there?"
Yeah,
and I'm like, "The what?"
And it would always make me think of the Drew Carey show and the Mimi character that was on there for some reason.
I don't know why it made me think of this, but anytime someone would say that, they'd be like, "Mimi," and I would immediately think of Rocko's Modern Life when Filbert and Heifer are pretending to be a worker at Conglommo.
Yeah.
And they're just like, say it with me now. Wee wee.
God,
I don't know why. Yeah, but
what a great show.
I'm sure that's a meme.
Yeah, but it's like the whole idea is that it's like something that transcends the person that's creating it. So like if we break down like the course of how a meme gets created, somebody gets the idea, remembers, say, the Rocko's Modern Life show, remembers a specific moment in it, pulls it out of it, and then like makes a joke utilizing that quote unquote template, as memes say. It's like a blank version of whatever the joke that they're making is, so people can quickly Photoshop it together.
So would you say that memes are definitely short?
Like, I think that they're to get that whole, like, what modern day, like, people try and quote unquote go viral. I think the quickest way to do that is through something that's easily transmitted. So like the simplest version of something is gonna shoot through the internet like through a goose. Like, yeah.
So still images are very, very short.
Yeah,
we're talking.
But now like Instagram has Reels and TikTok is out there. So like that is arguably a version of this as well, where like, you know, we now have a video iteration of memes rising up with all this coming about. So it's like you're getting this like lightning boilerplate culture of like these snap moments. Like people are bringing up SpongeBob for memes like left and right, and like a whole generation of people are now rediscovering SpongeBob we grew up with. Like. Then like the ton of other shows like Rocko's Modern Life and stuff also kind of have that every frame is a joke kind of idea where it's every single frame of SpongeBob could be made into a meme. I've been talking to my buddy Frank about this for like years now. Just we follow those pages like every frame in order. Like they literally like go through and like break apart the files of SpongeBob and like post every single frame from start to finish of each episode. And it's like it's kind of flabbergasting that each single frame of every episode has something funny in it. It's like the animators definitely knew what they were doing when they were crafting that show.
And two, Steven Hillenburg also worked on Rocko's Modern Life, so there's a Oh, excuse me while I adjust here. Okay, continue.
Like I said, it goes back. It has a rich, deep history of like how far this goes back, all the way back to the 1920s, and arguably there's versions of this that exist within Greek mythology and a lot of Greek philosophy and that kind of thing, and all that kind of studies. So it's like it's not quite as like well defined. They definitely didn't go as deep into the theory on it that far back, but it was present. Like there was something that they were aware of, which I think is kind of interesting. Like especially for you, someone being as versed in mythology and Greek history.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at mythology, if we're just kind of going off of the notion of, you know, once you put it out into the world, it's no longer yours and people can borrow and take from it, add to it. I mean, it's essentially just knocking on narrative as a whole. You know, I mean, if you look at different mythologies, like different pantheons of gods and heroes, there's always a counterpoint in each one, you know, kind of Zeus and Odin are the counterpoints to each other. Thor, we also have, you know, you have the lightning, but a little bit of counterpoint to Zeus, but I would say maybe like someone like Hercules is in there. And like stories getting told over and over again, you see them repeat. So there had to be that notion of people, you know, that cultural diffusion, as they will, as civilization gets going. People are, you know, trading, you know, goods, services, and they're trading ideas and stories, because back then you didn't have social media to drown your time in. You had to.
You could argue that it was like the same thing, but more long form. Like what we do in like seconds transcended years, like back in the day through word of mouth and writing. It's just kind of interesting how it's like we're still like basically accomplishing the same goals, just at a lightning pace compared to what was.
Yeah, no, like in Greek mythology, you had the demons, as they called them. And then in Japanese, you had the Oni, as they're known. But they represent sort of the same concept.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff for sure. And like, I love the whole idea too, like, as this is like being broken down and analyzed more, like by people who are like really watching pop culture and how shit's unfolding. Like, there are people who get paid to study this stuff, which is nuts. Yeah. But just a simple search, like you can find all kinds of information on Memetics. And like that's where I've like had some confusion over the years, because like that other MIM Memetic theory, like I've fallen down that spiral and gotten a lot of confusion, because they are very like different topic. Like they have almost nothing to do with one another, but they like literally one letter difference, like of a mistaken search. Yeah, I was looking that up too before we started recording, and I don't know if I would say they're completely different, at least from what I understood. I literally took like a glance, like a really quick cliff note definition of Memetic.
or the MIM
the other
theory, and it essentially is stating that people like are create relationships and ideas and culture through imitation, and when certain things can't be given or willingly given, then that leads to conflict.
It's in a similar area of socialization, but they are like definitely like separate boxes. Like, which is, it's interesting, but yeah, in the terms of memetics, I mean, I think it's getting some loose recognition. I'm probably tying these things more together than they are big time in pop culture, but I personally see like the connective tissue there. Like one of the big examples that always comes to my mind is the gold edition re-releases of the original trilogy of Star Wars from like the late 90s.
Oh yeah, the VHS, the Star Wars special edition.
Like they came back to the theaters for the first time since like their original releases, and everybody blew up because like, oh, I get to see Star Wars again. But like they show up and there's like all these changes that got made. And that was like the first spur of internet hatred towards George Lucas.
Yeah.
Prior to the prequels, like people started getting like violently angry. And what I think is very interesting about that in terms of this conversation, like what is memetics? Like I think that there's something to be said for why people got angry, because like Star Wars, you don't go back and you change Star Wars because we've seen it, we know what it is, we understand it. And now you're telling us you're making alterations and saying there's different things than what we saw on screen the first time around. And it's I think it's proving this theory, watching that all unfold. And like you and I are both fans of Red Letter Media. They've done endless breakdowns of where Star Wars has gone wrong. What's and that's that whole conversation of back and forth with the online. I think is largely how George got fed up and ended up selling to Disney. He clearly got fatigued from all of the discourse online and all the unbridled hatred. So I think that there's a very interesting analysis there of this as it pertains to that particular thing of just like going back and changing something that is very prominently rooted in pop culture, and people know very well you're going to go back and change it. I think it proves that like once it leaves your hands, it should stay out of your hands.
Well, yeah, and one of the argument points in like narrative theory, just in storytelling in general, is the notion as reader. I've mentioned this before. Reader as co-creator, or the audience, the viewer, the person who is consuming the art, for lack of a better term. And that's always like a thing. Like when you're trying to make something, you always ask like, okay, who do I want to write for? Am I writing for the audience? Should you write for the audience? Should I just write for myself? Should I write or maybe someone I know personally, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that's a big thing, is I think inevitably, whether you want to or not, especially if you're putting it out there. And now if you don't want it to be put out there, you just want to keep it, it's just for yourself and that's it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you do end up putting any creation or creative endeavor out in, to the public sector, the sphere, out into the forum, if you will, you then have to accept that notion that the audience, the reader, has now become a co-creator of your story, even though they've done absolutely nothing.
But they're
to
now
make it.
The interpreters. They're part of the conversation, and especially to the volume of minds that, especially in the terms of film, novels also, but the mass amount of people that you're getting to turn wheels and think about this thing and process it. That the amount of mind power that's out there is arguably more than the person who created it. So once you put this thing in their heads and they start, analyzing it and turning wheels and thinking about all especially in terms of something as expansive and world buildy as Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or, any of the hundreds of other big world building things, you have a mass amount of people who are going to get down to every grain of sand that exists in that world. Now I realize the joke, but especially in terms of the meme. There's endless amounts of processing that goes on through your audience that are going to turn over every stone and look at every possible pitfall and every little nuance. And like in terms of Star Trek also, how they went back to Picard, I know a lot of people had issues with that first season because there were inconsistencies going back to TNG, like Next Generation. So there's like a cultural interesting thing going on there. I personally have always taken this as connected. All these things to be like connected to this theory. I mean, I know probably people out there that would argue with me and say it's, not like it's not meant to be, but I personally see the connective tissue there.
All right, but yes, go with that connective tissue. Where does it lead?
And like we've said, like, any like Gene Roddenberry, once he puts, I'm not saying like he can't continue to make additional Star Trek, but like if he were to go back, say during the iterations of Next Generation and go back and say, I want to completely redo like one scene of the Star Trek motion picture.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would have been like an uproar. Like, Star Trek fans are volatile enough, but I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like they're like what that specific piece of creativity. Like, not to say there can't be additional Star Trek movies that maybe contradict whatever, but it's like you have to take into account that you've put this thing out into the minds of your audience. If you change details of it that don't make sense, or people are going to call you on that stuff. You have to, the more expansive something gets, I think the more plates you're spinning, the harder it is to keep everything up and going. It's like you gotta know every fine detail. Like if you have a big expansive world, you gotta have notes. You gotta have like large like research on your own material to know that you are doing, like, you're keeping up with what you're telling people. Like if you contradict yourself, it's gonna weaken what you're trying to do.
Well, does it too like call in the notion that when something like that happens, it makes it seem as if the version you enjoyed or created is invalid or inferior to this newer, updated?
That's what I think is like part of like why this is such a like a touchy, interesting subject. Like maybe people haven't put this particular label on it, but people are still aware of like what this is through like one pop culture instance or another. It's like it's prevalent in Marvel as well. Like the difference between the cinematic universe versus what happened in God knows how many iterations of the comics. Like, I think part of the issue there is like there's so many different storylines that have happened that contradict one another. It's kind of like the Star Wars expanded universe, where like basically anything you ever wanted to have happen to any of these characters is kind of a version of it that's struck that chord. And it's like not all of them can be 100% true, unless in the case of Marvel where they say, it's in the multiverse and everything has officially happened.
Yeah.
But it is like a very interesting conversation of don't disrespect your audience. It's like they're in a lot of cases they're going to know more than you do about your thing that you're trying to make. So I think it's very important to know what you're creating as much as humanly possible and not contradict yourself, because you'll get called on it. Yeah, look at like any convention. I mean, how many Comic Cons have you and I been to? Like there's like an army of people walking around.
Yeah.
Like any of those question and answer panels, like we watched one time. What was it? Judge Reinhold was going off. He was just having a field day about Beverly Hills Cop. One time.
Yeah.
Great dude. I like that dude. But like there's an endless sea of audience members that have, especially the longer something exists in the zeitgeist and is out there, and as the home video market is the thing and streaming, there's more access to these things than there's ever been. So you have endless amounts of scrutiny and criticism. You have to be consistent. You have to know what that is. And I think if you go back and bend those bars, as it were, and like try and retroactively change something that people know to be true, it's going to come with considerable amount of blowback, like especially in the age of the internet. And it's a kind of, I think, funnily enough, I think the internet and memes, as they would probably be in a lot of ways disregarded from this theory to some degree. Like people probably wouldn't see the connective tissue, but I personally see it as like the internet memes, as it were, are like symptomatic of what this theory is. Like they're like a thread of pop culture feeding back from the audience and back into pop culture. It's like we're getting this looping effect.
So does this theory like? I'm trying to wrap my head around it a little bit better. So wait, you said it started in the 20s?
Some of the big stuff that happened with it was in the 70s. Richard Dawkins is a big proponent of this. If you look into all this, he's constantly quoted as one of the term coiners for a lot of different things that exist in this, but I did see some things that were dating back where it was starting to become prevalent in like 23 or so.
Yeah.
The term meme derives from the ancient Greek meaning imitator,
I'm
pretender.
I'm sorry. Are you lost? What? But continue.
It was like the term was derived in the 20s from ancient Greek.
Yeah. Okay.
So like people started using it around that time. One of the earliest instances in German in 1904, the evolutionary biologist Richard Seaman, best known for development in the engram theory of memory, in his work translated into English in 1921, where the term came from. So it was a German biologist who actually like coined it into English from ancient Greek.
Wow. Okay, that's a weird. That's going through the stages to get to what we have today.
Yeah, it's interesting because like it was in ancient Greek culture, but it wasn't even brought up until just the last century, which is nuts. Like
that we know of. I mean, you never know. There could have been two people somewhere, someday in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, this is just what's on record, Like there's a lot of stuff that happens that's not on record.
Yes. That's a little sidebar. That's always weird to think about. Is like, there's all this stuff that we know of and have record of. But what's the stuff we don't? Like, what stuff happened that we'll never know about?
Now, this is partly what I really want to get into with Dark, because that's one of my favorite aspects of it. Because like,
okay, well, we'll save that then for that one. Just a little appetizer to wet the whistle.
I don't want to get too spoilery, but it's like the crazy amount of like under the cuff things that happen, like beyond the understanding of the principal characters, is what makes what makes that show.
It's not a dark episode.
Okay.
But anyway,
soon. Where was I? What happened?
No, we were just going over like how the
history
term came about. Yeah,
it's like the ancient Greek. There was a lot of these kind of things we talked about, Aristotle's Poetics and all that back in the day, and there's a lot of interesting study of this kind of thing, of like how sociology, storytelling, all these things kind of intertwine to basically form culture and like how we interpret these things. And there's like a lot of weird, crazy things that like we personally do every day that like you would never think to put a term onto, but like I personally see like internet memes and like meme culture online, like all the Reddit and all like the meme pages of Facebook and endless amounts of Twitter, X, Instagram, all that stuff. Like, as things like transcend personal creation to be like a growing and evolving pop culture, I think like the middle ground between that, like where things leave people's hands and like flow back in, I think that's like the area where like Memetics kind of exists. It's like in the interim between where like things are absorbed and thrown back, and like it's interesting.
Well, this almost reminds me, I might have mentioned this once before on a previous episode. You ever heard of the pizza effect?
I don't. I would definitely remember this one. Go on.
No, I'm butchering it as I always do. I'm just kind of giving you my recollection of it. It's essentially something is created, it leaves where it was created, goes out into the world, and then comes back to where it was created a little bit different.
Yeah.
So like that feedback loop. And essentially, like if you look at an original pizza, it's different, much smaller compared to like a pizza here in the States. And so like when the first pizza was ever made from Italy, it left, came over here.
Is this like an actual theory?
A little bit different. What?
Is this like an actual theory that's out there?
Yeah, no, it's called the pizza effect. You can look it up. I'm not lying about this. Yeah.
Because it's really funny. That made me think of, have you seen Community?
I've seen bits.
The episode with the timelines, with the dice timelines, where they're flipping the die and like they go through like different person from the group going to pick up the pizza. I'm like, they definitely had that in mind.
Oh, maybe. Okay. Yeah. Like like it essentially like, and then the pizza went to the States, came over here, whatever, is different, added to, and then comes back. And essentially, I guess if you put it in a more scholarly manner, the creation begins once it changes, it then comes back and influences itself. Its new version keeps influencing it, and you just create like that loop. that keeps going back and forth.
Yeah.
You see it in like yoga too, I think was another one, if I remember correctly.
How in yoga?
Well, yeah, like the stance in like original yoga is very kind of different compared to like what you would maybe see in your local gym around here. But like it started out one way, came over to is adopted by another culture, gets added to, changes a little bit, and then it comes back and influences the original version.
Yeah,
which changes it. But yeah, no, it's called the pizza effect. I
That's
believe.
interesting.
I'm not told. I swear I'm not making this up. That or I am completely making this up, but I don't believe I am.
Can we put a retraction of the following episode? The members of the study podcast sincerely apologize to our audience, as Juan has no idea what he's talking about.
If they don't know that by now,
they're
then,
not paying attention.
Yes. So yeah, that just speaking about this memetic. Oh God, say it again. How do you?
I've always heard it memetic theory.
Memetic,
or as like I said, because of the MIM memetic.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm not saying. Yeah, okay.
It's commonly referred to these days as just memetics because it's less easily confused with
memetics. Okay,
yeah,
but yeah, it sounds similar to it.
Yeah, well, it's like even like you literally type one wrong letter and you're on a completely different philosophical path. Like, I think that's honestly just plays to the hilarity of like how stupid memes can be. It's like I type one wrong letter and I'm like studying the wrong theory.
Well, do you ever get, okay, I'll notice kind of branching off of this sometimes, you know how people will do those, watch, what are they called? Like they're just filming themselves watching something, right?
There's a term for that. I can't remember what.
Like, you know, it's just like if someone just a reaction video, essentially. I think.
Yeah.
But, to like someone watching Dark for the first time.
Yeah.
And they're capturing their live reaction.
Yeah.
And I would say sometimes I'm guilty of having watched those a few times, but it's only certain things because it's the closest thing you can get short of losing your memory. Having well, it's also like the certain YouTubers, like it's not as big of a trend these days, but it's like I remember like when PewDiePie was huge and a bunch of others, like they would just literally sit there and go through like a Reddit deep dive of like looking at memes and like you would just like I sometimes would pull them up just because I'd find a bunch of stupid crap to laugh at and laugh with these people, but it's like they're making money off of just literally sitting around. Sitting there watching, and it's the closest thing you can get to watching it again for the first time, short of having amnesia.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed was a lot of times I would watch someone watching something like Lord of the Rings or another one, Gladiator.
Yeah.
They would recognize the memes, the moments that the memes came from.
Yeah.
You know, like, are you not entertained?
Or what's the one with Nicolas Cage where like he's in the office, like Vampire's Kiss or something. And then that's like the one where like he's like he's tilting his head back and he just looks absolutely crazed. And then but like that somebody drew that at one point and it became like a huge meme. And it was like that alongside with the Neil deGrasse Tyson with his hands thrown up. There was like a whole series of those that like were huge at a particular time. Like
the point I'm striving at real quick is does this theory insinuate some kind of negative connotation to it? Is it bad? I'm just asking. Is it bad that people know things more for the meme than they do the actual creative endeavor? Like, are you missing so much more? Like, you're only scratching the tip of the iceberg. Like, for example, people knew the "Are You Not Entertained" more than the actual Gladiator movie, but maybe it led because apparently there's going to be a Gladiator 2. There's going to be a sequel to that.
That's a topic for another day, but that is a very interesting subject because I think it has potential to be pretty good. They not going on too crazy of a sidebar, but they got their kid who played Lucius back.
Okay, but anyway, I was just like going off of like, is there a negative connotation with this memetics in the sense that is it trying to not necessarily warn, but say like, here's what can happen with this if it's not. It kind of gives you maybe a watered down version of something else.
I think that it's kind of a cross study of like a micro moment from like specifically with like internet memes. Like I think you're getting this like case study of like analyzing specific moments. And as a result, there's more ease of access to that analyzed moment. So you're getting like that specific moment. But in a lot of cases, it does bring people to find these kinds of things that they wouldn't otherwise find. Like
possibly
for an example, like I know the teasers that we post on our Instagram, like people have found movies just from watching that don't even watch our episodes. Like, you know, so there's ways that like that also drives traffic to a beneficial way. Like there's probably negatives to that as well, where like something gets totally reduced to a stupid moment.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of where I'm going with it. I'm just curious, like, so I'll just focus it on internet memes. Are internet memes good or bad? If you had to take a...
Oh, I would definitely pick good, but I'm personally biased. I'm very much personally biased on that because I love memes. It's interesting because I think we're in an age where somebody can look at stupid cartoonish versions of real studied culture, but also like I'm speaking purely about myself. I can't speak for anybody else but me. I love laughing my stupid brain off at something mindless, but also like respecting where it came from and like having like a deep understanding of like this piece of intellectual property as well. So it's like I can look at it from like the stupid and smart side of the coin.
Yeah.
But I respect that not everybody can.
I guess that's a good point, like knowing, you know, to have the respect for the original source, but also being able to enjoy. Yeah, I guess you got to have both. I guess that's more my concern.
Like for me, it comes from the arena of like you have to be able to laugh at things as well.
Yeah, I guess I hope that people are still staying balanced in the approach when it comes to memes, but I don't know the answer to that if we are.
I also take it very heavily from the standpoint that nothing about society is balanced whatsoever. It's all just chaos. So take that for whatever grains of salt. But yeah, it's a not like we've covered a couple of topics so far that are not well defined. They're like kind of fringe developmental conversations. I found in my diving through just trying to find stuff for this, there's a list of quote unquote memetic hazards. And this, like we were talking before about how like there could be a negative side to this. I should have thought of this when you brought that up, but what was the site I was on where I found this? I think it was Project Nero was where I think I found this. But they define it as a memetic hazard is a term used to describe an effect or an anomaly passed through information. So like something that's not intended, but like through the virality of like sharing things around, adverse effects come to be. Like say expressing ideas or data, like memes themselves are ultimately harmless, but let's say like in like a meme that goes viral, somebody like pulls up a very serious security flaw in like a banking system and like a bunch of people exploit it. Like that's a potential unforeseen hazard. Like you were just making a joke, but like you shined a light on a very real potential flaw and like you caused a real problem.
Well, no, yeah, that's similar to like the unintended, I think it's called the unintended consequences law or theory in like science, or like when you're building something like, okay, I need to build a dam to provide power to the community. But in doing so, I'm also destroying half of the forest to build it and reworking the topography in the watershed, which could lead to, who knows what, could lead to a fall in sea life, which is also the main product of the community, which would then have economic complications. But yeah, I see what they're getting at there with the hazard.
Yeah. And like what they would consider a basic memetic hazard, entities labeled as memetic get in a person's mind and won't leave. So like basically you get a meme stuck in your head that you can't get out and it's like distracting you.
Oh yeah.
Like that's what like a basic hazard.
I feel like that's social media in general.
I was going to say that's the world we're living in these days, but there's also what they define as an info hazard. Entities titled as info hazards stimulate and spread, restrict classified information. That's kind of like what I was getting at before with like a potential security flaw or exploit that could be shown a light on. There's also what they consider to be a cognito hazard. Entities titled cognito hazard cause anomalous effects upon those that experience them. Many information class entities considered to be cognito hazards. A good example of one would be like somebody stating that you don't see me, and it's like it changes culture to such a degree that people legitimately believe you to be invisible, like as a hypothetical. So like you actually alter the perception of like what a reality is, like, or like say like, you know, what you perceive as the color blue, you constantly express to the point that people think it's green, and you actually alter like culture to the point where blue is green.
That's interesting.
So like that's the basic idea of it, is if a cognito hazard is like you alter public perception to the point where you actually change what something means.
That's nuts. That's kind of scary too if you think about it.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's happening literally daily on the internet. like people are like altering the perception of what things are constantly. And luckily, like we live in such an information age that things are grounded to a degree in what they were, but like there's a lot of warping and changing and altered perception things going on literally on a daily basis, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And we must arm ourselves with knowledge.
If there is no knowledge left, then how does one arm themselves?
If everyone's stupid, then I must be smart. So I think this sits in a category of that, where like it's something that's still growing and still being studied and evolving.
Yeah, anytime you're talking about theory, and you're going to have that issue of you're dealing way more abstract. So it's like trying to take that and make it more concrete.
But definitely some of the points of this that are outlined and you can research and look at definitely align with especially pop culture, like current pop culture, as well as like pre-internet things. Like you can I bring up like largely why I bring up the gold editions of Star Wars is because like they were literally right before all this came about. So it was like I look at that as like a direct precursor to like a lot of what a lot of the types of conversations that are had on the internet.
Yeah, no, I mean that was the start of the re-release, the remaster, the reboot, because I don't think, I mean,
it's been redone like 4 times since then. Now Disney has their own iteration of it, so it's just. I mean,
there were like remakes were nothing unheard of prior to that.
Well, this isn't the thing that's interesting. I wouldn't be more comfortable with a remake, to be honest, like a full, like ground up redo, as opposed to going into the original footage and like making alterations to the popular perception of like what it was. Like there's a really popular thing. I think it was Topher Grace actually like found old film prints of like the original releases of Star Wars, and like he's been like remastering and recutting it like to like what it was originally. Like he was one of the first people to do like the quote unquote despecialized edition.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, there's some interesting conversations of like just trying to get like the amounts of energy that are being put in just to get back to something as it was originally released. Like it's kind of nuts. You can't even get like a copy. Like you have to have like original VHS or like find a copy of this despecialized online just to even see it as it was originally released, which is crazy.
And I got to say that was the first time the special edition release was the first time I owned a Star Wars copy. Because most of the time I remember watching it on television. Yeah,
we like taped it off TV.
So like there wasn't, so you had commercials or whatever. But yeah, I don't think I personally never owned one until that one.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It was also like that scene that they added with Jabba. I think that not to go on a whole Star Wars thing, but like I see it as that like kind of takes away because like there's like that final reveal of both the Emperor and Jabba that happened. Like, but like when you see Jabba beforehand, I think it kind of takes away from the reveal. And also like all the dialogue and information that's given in that scene is basically identical to the Greedo scene. So you're just getting like a doubled over scene.
Yeah.
And, by that same token, I think this opens up an even deeper question about remasters and, what is too far, and going back into the remaster process. I think, if you're using modern technology to kind of beautify things and just bring, classic cinema up to a proper standard, there's a proper avenue for that. But, it gets kind of gray at things like E.T. E.T. had a really rocky situation similar to Star Wars in which they added a lot of CGI and things that even Spielberg says that he regrets going in and tapping into. So I think we're still trying to define those lines.
Yeah.
Going back to like what we had said previously about like what is a meme, it's like there's like a clip of audio will be taken out of the Matrix, and it's like, do you remember the one, it was pretty popular, where it was like the clip of Morpheus saying the prophecy is true. And it's like somebody dubbed that over like a picture of an image of a cat being zoomed in on, like real weird as its head's flying back, and somebody like put it behind like a hyperspace window, like going through outer space, and it's like this cat traveling through the universe, like hearing Morpheus speak. It's like the original intent of like that clip of audio is now like transcended, like what it like just all for the purpose of a stupid joke, just to make you laugh. For 15 seconds.
Yeah. And I mean, I think isn't like red pill, blue pill.
Yeah, like
a meme too, and
it's like it's basically become into the zeitgeist of like common speak. Like it's common vernacular now to like be, oh, you're getting red pilled, dude. Like that's like, you know, you're getting this deep, unwelcomed, vast knowledge of like what you're not supposed to know according to like pop culture. like there's some kind of entity that's like keeping mass knowledge from you, and you're like you've accessed it. It's just it's weird how like eventually like information. Like we talked to you about like the zeitgeist before, and like things like eventually transcend so far that they're like part of like common day speak. It's kind of nuts. Yeah. It's like, well, you kind of like take for example like Citizen Kane, like Rosebud is like a common thing as well.
I mean just us all the quotes we do all the time.
How many weeks in a row have we been quoting "I love you" to death? Like I couldn't. It was I brought it so to the forefront of my mind I couldn't get it out for like 2 or 3 weeks. It's nuts. Things live with you like that.
Yeah, it's that, I'll go back to ludonarrative dissonance again. Mm-hmm. That relationship of the parts to the whole.
It's interesting how that does kind of relate to this. It's like separating certain contexts.
It's as if almost it's kind of, like I'm thinking about it. Memetics is similar. I think our good pal John Carpenter got it pretty well in The Thing, and really says it right before he does the famous blood test scene. I got an idea when I saw the previous, I forget the guy who was on the operating table, I forget the character's name, but when he gets the idea to do the blood test, to see who's a thing and who's not, he gets it because he's like every little part of the thing kind of transforms and is its own separate being and wants to live, so it'll crawl away and it becomes something different. The head like melts off and becomes like a spider. The stomach is like a giant friggin'.
Honestly, yeah. Like this theory is kind of like The Thing. It's just like it morphs. Everything morphs and evolves and like transcends its original form.
It just made me think of that when it's like how again that parts to the whole and the meme takes off and grows legs and starts walking around
and then infects something else and
then there's me being like, you gotta be f***ing kidding me.
and blast it with a fire.
Yeah. But yeah, interesting.
No, that's great. I love all of it. It's just it's a complex one. It's not very easily defined. I have trouble I sound like a crazy person when I try and explain things like this in common conversations. That's why I need you as a soundboard to like bounce these things off of, because makes me feel less crazy. Yeah, I like fringe theories like this, where it's kind of on the forefront and it makes total sense, but then you're still kind of forming it in your own head as much as it's taking shape in actual culture and people are figuring it out and studying it. And especially, too, we talked how it kind of connects with ludonarrative. It is kind of in a similar arena, which is interesting. How this kind of pertains to entertainment law.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So we had a couple of friends back in school that have now since become entertainment lawyers, and like conversations with them have like spurred a lot of really interesting things that I've like otherwise wouldn't have thought of. How things are trademarked and protected, and the nature of like pitching and all of that. There's a lot of really fascinating stuff in like protecting yourself and all that. But as things transcend, basically what Memetics would say is you don't own it, but entertainment law is basically the exact opposite and would say you own it for eternity. It's yours. Nobody can take it from you. And it's like, it's a direct contradiction of natural law of these things. And it's how the two kind of fly in the face of one another. It's like Memetics, things live totally in the stratosphere of society. Like you make a movie, it's like everybody sees it. It's out there. It's in everybody's heads, but it's, solely under the thumb of the person who holds the quote unquote IP, intellectual property of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too, it's tough to put the genie back in the bottle once he's out.
Yeah.
Or the floodgates have opened. I'm thinking of just like, I can think of a moment a long time ago when I went to a pirate game and I took a video camera with me at the time, a smaller like handheld camera.
And then like Family Guy, they busted in and said, do you have the express consent of the NBC?
No, that's essentially what happened. I was only maybe like 11 at the time. And it was me just trying to get
funnier.
No, yeah. And like here I am, like just recording my experience at the game. That I was doing the TikTok selfie long before, and here I am with
you
like
an 11-year-old
camera. Yeah, I still remember to this day. I was down the first base line toward the bullpen at the old Three River Stadium, and this guy with a walkie comes just trudging down like I had a weapon of some kind. And he's like, hey, you got to put that away. All right. Okay. We got word that you had it. Can't have it. So I put it away and said, all right, fine, whatever. Now it's everywhere. Now everyone does it. You just go to people take pictures. It's on their phone. So it's almost like the time has changed where and they realize it's like, well, we can't,
Well, I thought it was hilarious. I have a similar story. I was at a ship port and someone's getting airlifted out. Everyone around me, like hundreds of people, are taking videos on their phones.
Yeah.
I happen to have a mirrorless camera on me that I'm taking video on. They pin me out in the crowd and they tell me to stop it. And I'm looking around. I'm like, there's a literal sea of people doing the same I'm doing. They just happen to have it on a phone, but I'm the problem.
Yeah. No, it makes no sense. I'm like, especially back then, I'm like, what the hell was I going to do with this? Like the internet was not anything like it is now. I couldn't post it anywhere. What do you think? I'm going to resell this or something? Like it was stupid in that sense. But even now, I'm like, now they realize like, well, what are we going to do? Like billions of people do this. Yeah. Like, are we going to tell everyone, no, don't put your cell phones up during the game? Even when you go to like performances sometimes in like theaters and people say, please silence your cell phones now or don't take flash photography. People still do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how like the two like in the context of this, like how, people who will fight those fights have total conflict of like someone who would just like take something and put it online and like repurpose it for the sense of a joke or, something to throw in the face of whomever. It's kind of like the header at the beginning of the movie theater showings now before the previews. They do the ads and then they have the bit where they tell you to silence your phones, but during the questionnaire bit, they ask you to scan this QR code. So.
Yeah. And I think too, like, how you were saying with entertainment law and saying like, oh, you own it.
But in a very more real sense, I didn't own it.
Yeah. It was just my way of saying like, I mean, at this point, you can put it out there and say you own it, but like you're going to have a very hard time stopping it. I mean, even just like how shows get pirated on the internet, and downloaded illegally. It's so difficult to stop.
You're never going to stop piracy, not in its entirety.
But yeah, it's that sense of, well, is making a meme a form of pirating? Like, is it? I guess maybe in a sense, but
yeah, I think that is an interesting conversation, though. It's like, to a degree, memes are like a form of piracy, but it's like it's legitimately profitable because like in the age of influencers, like people are actually making money off of like just even watching memes. So it's like, I think corporations recognize that and they're like directly ignoring the entertainment law aspect of like not allowing it.
Well, and I think they understand too that it's a way of advertising. I think, back to our Twitch episode, because it hasn't happened yet, I think there is an argument that when you're playing a game without the consent to broadcast it from the company, technically there's an infringement happening, but for them it's free marketing, and they're like, you know what, it's okay, let it go.
It's free real estate. Well, it's too like that's interesting that you bring that up, because like I was watching the Oscars, I was just trying to watch it off the live streams and like it kept getting taken down. So it's like, because there was no streaming solution for it, like I just wanted to watch it, but I don't have cable, so it was only showing on cable, which is kind of silly that there was no Hulu or whatever. For the sake of video games, you're not getting like the playability experience of it, so there's an argument to be made that you're not getting like the actual product. But in like the case of like live streaming a broadcast of some kind, like they will fight that tooth and nail and say no, don't do that.
No, this definitely brings up a lot of interesting questions, this Memetics.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. It's deeper than just the face value of it. It's not just, dumb internet jokes. Like there's like an actual cultural philosophy behind it. And it's honestly pure like loose internet research connectivity that memes are called memes through like memetic theory or memetics.
Yeah.
Like, that just happens to be where they got their name from. But like, I looked this up initially years and years ago, just purely on the sake of like, what the hell does the word meme mean? I didn't understand it, and I had to get an answer. So
I still don't necessarily understand it, but I understand it a little bit better now.
Yeah, like for all my stupid ramblings, I hope I've like brought some kind of value out of this theory. And like,
no, but
no, you didn't. But it's okay.
If there is no knowledge left, then how does one arm themselves?
If everyone's stupid, then I must be smart.